We're live, Tracy.
Hi, everybody.
All right. Well, it is happy hour with the captains. We got Dr. Tracy with us. What's going on?
Not much. I am super excited to be here. I'm a huge fan of you guys. I think that everything that you do is awesome, and it's just incredible the kind of following that you guys have gotten.
Oh, thanks. We're stoked to have you on with us. We're fans as well, especially your rap talents.
Yep.
Daniel and I, it's one of our goals to have a rap video, so
we're doing it. We have to finish Bloom Bloom Pow.
I know. This is true.
Is the studio up and ready? Because as soon as this whole quarantine thing is done.
Yeah, we actually have an in-house videographer now. So we're one step closer to our rap video dreams.
That's it. I'm going to send you guys the lyrics, and then you guys can just rewrite the lyrics today.
All right, perfect.
It's going to be awesome.
I like it. So this is happy hour with the captains. It's a pretty laid back deal. We like to get our science friends, people a lot smarter than Daniel and I, and get together, have cocktails, talk about how everybody's adapting to the Corona world, and talk about water quality, science, and basically just have a good time and try to connect with our supporters and connect our supporters with some science folks.
Yeah, I got Citrify from Palm City. This is actually a gift after the last video. Somebody swung by my house and dropped off some of this. So this is our, hopefully, yeah, this one didn't blow up. The last one, remember the last one, Chris? It blew up all over me when I opened it during this.
Yeah, I remember. I'm going with the old trusty Eagle Rare bourbon.
There you go.
Yep. It's delicious.
And I have Tito's and Fresca because I get migraines a lot. So Tito's, so far, it is the only thing that hasn't given me a migraine. That and tequila. But I figured, it's a Tuesday night. Let's just
save the tequila for Friday.
Right.
Or at least Wednesday.
Or tomorrow.
Right.
Yep. So how's it been going, Doctor? Tracy?
Science just, it doesn't sleep.
Yep.
Considered essential workers. And honestly, things have just gotten more busy. Not only because there's such an outreach aspect in these schools, especially in the beginning when they were out, there was a lot of need and request for educational content. And so I was doing that on top of everything else that I normally do. And then we're coming into the phase where we're finishing up projects. So we have all these annual reports due, but also writing proposals, scopes of work for the next 5-year or 1-year contract, depending on the project. And then interns, they're all coming. I'm going to have most of them work remotely, still do the social distancing all summer. But at the same time, I'm going to have 9.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I think that I figured that some of them were going to back out because of the traveling, at least the ones that were out of state. But at this point, I have a lot of interns this summer. And so we have 4 main projects, and I'm super excited about that.
Nice. Awesome.
Nice.
That's one thing we've noticed with the working from home and everything is if you adapt right, you actually can up the amount of outreach you do and whatever by doing things like what we're doing here this evening. Enables us to, where Daniel and I would travel around the state, we'd travel, 4 to 6 days a week.
Right.
Now we're able to reach more people than we would in person digitally. But we're definitely looking forward to getting back to normal. But I think this has forced us to revert back to a lot of our tactics we used when we first started the organization, and we were just rolling around with cell phones and, working out of our houses.
For which is pretty awesome. Yeah, there's I do a lot of presentations too, and all the traveling. I had a month and a half that I was not going to be in Florida at all. And of course it all got canceled. But what I realized with this working from home is you're exactly right. You can reach so many people digitally, and you could be connected but through, things like Zoom or WebEx or anything like that. And it kind of makes me think that, I can really limit the amount of traveling that I'm doing, the amount of fossil fuels that I'm burning to get from one place to another by replacing some of those presentations with this digital platform.
Yeah, definitely. And even like piggybacking on some of the in-person presentations, but there was a lot of times where it's like kind of you have to choose one or the over the other, just because travel, you're not going to get back in time for the next one. So maybe I think we're going to be able to get creative going into the future where we're able to have a mixture and reach even more people, which for what we do, that's the key. More people we reach, more people we get involved.
That's totally
Definitely
what it's all about.
Yeah. Plus, you can take naps in between each of your meetings, which is a huge bonus.
It is. I always get groggy if I try to do that. See, that's if it works for you. Apparently, it's supposed to be really good to take a nap, as long as it's like a short nap.
Yeah.
I always feel more tired when I wake up from a nap.
A 30-minute nap is like the best thing in the world. Otherwise, you start dragging too much.
Yeah, if you sleep too long, though, if you go over like 30 minutes, you get in like an hour, you're done.
Oh, yeah, you're done for the day, and then the next day, too. Definitely so. So, yeah, this is like, I guess, what, the third one of these we've done? Chris?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we had Steve Davis from Everglades Foundation on the first week. And then last week we had Dr. Parsons from FGCU, who you know pretty well.
Yeah, I call him my baby daddy because my my first employee, Devin, actually she was an intern, then an employee, is now his grad student.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Dr. Mike's awesome.
Yeah.
He really is. He's so cool. Did he play music for you? He has a hat.
No, he didn't.
What do you mean, like play the guitar?
He's great, and he sings too. So we had a conference, the National Harmful Algae Bloom Conference, and he actually put together what they called a HAB band. They actually played dun, 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 dun. I got up there and I rapped with them in the background. I swear to God, that really happened.
Daniel. We had Mike on here and didn't even get his music. I think we got screwed.
So yeah, so Polar Ice Ice Baby never felt so long in my life, in front of it was really funny because you're in front of all these scientists that have no clue what you're doing.
Right.
It was pretty funny.
I like that. Daniel and I actually enjoy it when people have no clue what we're doing, which actually happens pretty often. A lot of times our staff thinks that. They're probably like, what the hell are those guys doing?
So give me an example of some like weird antics.
Well, probably a lot of the time when we're just when we have like group or whatever you call it, team meetings, and Daniel and I are like in another place doodling on iPads, or I think they wonder what's going through our heads sometimes.
Yeah, and then like with all these Zoom things, we'll just be like in the middle of a team meeting, and Chris and I will be like crawling through the palmettos in our yards, and like everybody's just kind of like staring at the screen. We're like, "What's wrong?" They're like, "What exactly are you doing here?"
That's awesome.
Fair amount of that. Yeah, we caught a banded water snake on our second to last team happy hour. That was exciting.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Quick hands.
Yep.
Yeah.
We went tarpon fishing. Last week? A couple days ago, we took a couple of our staff, Noah and McKenna. We took them out tarpon fishing for their first time. Noah got his first tarpon. So
Congratulations.
Yep. So that was
Yeah,
cool.
it was a good time.
Yeah.
I've yet to get my first tarpon, so I'll have to come out with you guys sometime.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Make it happen.
Our boats have been non-functional for a very long time, and the quarantines kind of forced us to get them out on the water. I've been out like 5 or 6 times. Hadn't been running for like almost 3 years, so it's definitely feels good to be back out there. And the water's freaking beautiful out there right now.
It is.
Awesome.
Speaking of
When you're not getting a bunch of rain, it usually looks pretty good.
Yeah, that's true, because you don't have all the suspended material coming in.
Yep.
Yeah. Speaking of first, I saw my first coral snake the other day, and I was super excited, and I was trying to capture the moment. And I was getting great footage. It was awesome. It was perfect. Like, it's so beautiful how it slithers. And then I realized that I wasn't recording the entire time. And yeah, so first coral snake just in the middle of the street, okay, goes underneath some brush. The next day I hear people talking that they saw a coral snake, and I'm like, oh, it must be my friend. I need to find out where he's going so I can call Fish and Wildlife and have them move him, because he's obviously lost if it's more than me just seeing the coral snake. And then another neighbor's like, oh yeah, I saw a coral snake. And I was like, oh really, you found him where? And she's like, what do you mean you found him? Scared that it was my pet because she had killed it. And,
no.
yeah, I was pretty disappointed, but it talking to that person, and then talking to somebody else on my street who told me they were giving me advice on how to handle fleas for dogs, because I have a dog. And they were telling me to use, 3 times the label rate of granular pesticide. And then in addition, put 3 times the label rate of the liquid form of pesticide on your lawn. And I just, it was really hard moment for me, because I didn't want to insult the person, but yet I was horrified. And
it works well, because then your dog dies and you don't have to worry about having a dog anymore.
You never have to worry about fleas. But yeah, I mean, it all goes to show you the disconnect between the public and scientists, and the need for that scientific education to really bring us all on the same page, because things like insecticide, fertilizer, they're not regulated for our homes. Wildlife conservation too, it's all stuff that's so important that the general public knows. And that's where you guys come in, and some of my efforts are trying to bring up that scientific literacy of the general public, so that we all make better behaviors.
Yeah,
for
and
sure.
I think that's a good point. Is one of the things we try to do is connect science with the public in a manner that is entertaining to them, and that they can engage with and understand. I mean, half the time when, someone like yourself is telling Daniel and I about some scientific thing, we're going like, wait, all right, back up. We don't know what the hell you're talking about. You got to streamline it here. But once we're able to understand the science, and then kind of convey it in our own just everyday terms,
Yep.
That's kind of one of the things that, I think is helpful for us, is just to get the public to look at science through more just common terminology, through a common lens.
Yeah,
and that kind of gets us back to when I think the reason we thought like, hey, let's have Dr. Tracy on here. I was bored scrolling through Instagram, as I think most of us have experienced at least some point during quarantine. And I saw one of your stories, and it hit pretty hard, because we had we have Facebook and Instagram accounts, all that, and every year or so they make you renew your disclaimer, because it's if you're working on any issue of national importance, it gets put into the bucket of this is political. It doesn't matter what you're working on. If it's a social issue, whatever, it just it gets stamped political. And I saw you had put something out. You had experienced something real similar to that. And, at first, when you first see it, it's like, all right, this is kind of bullshit, because you're trying to educate people using scientific facts, and you get put into the same, bucket as, whatever, kind of political, other stuff people are doing out there. It's like, if you stop and think about it, it's mean, I think it's a bad sign. I mean, it doesn't make sense.
You're exactly right, and it was my polar ice ice baby video too, and it was
Which is
just
for those that don't know, it's a rap video, right? That's your rap video.
Yes, shockingly or not. I mean, obviously, it's about climate change, but it really takes a scientific approach. There's no politics. It's a even the characters in the video. It's two people from different backgrounds coming together at the end and compromising to make the world a better place. I mean, it was kind of disturbing in a way that it was seen as political, just because it's so important for us to really draw the line. There has to be a line drawn somewhere in science, because the minute that scientific fact starts becoming political, that's when we're putting the power in politicians' hands to dictate our perception of reality, dictate what scientific fact is. And that's it's a tough line to draw, because so much of that scientific fact then leads into regulations, that leads into budget adjustments and things like that. So I understand the chain, but at the same time, it's really important that scientists are really able to communicate the science without those restrictions of, oh, it might be too political.
Yeah.
Because honestly, like 99.9% of the human population, they're not scientists. So if we are just communicating and writing and speaking to scientists, we're doing disservice to everybody. How are we supposed to grow as a species if we're not doing it together?
Yeah, and it's I think a lot of this comes back to, if there's a political party or group or whatever that's in control, and everybody's guilty of it, but when they'll accept facts and data as facts and data if it aligns with their agenda, but as soon as it doesn't, then it's like, whoa, that's political, we're trying to stay political. It's like, well, you're a politician, so
it's very
Mark
true.
Earthling just chimed in here, divide the people so they fight amongst each other instead of being one unified voice. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's we see it all the time, and we're always encouraging people to work together to we're all in this for the same reason. We want clean water. We want there to be some kind of future. We've seen, our estuary just go completely down the drain in the last 20 years. And, it's like, we all want the same thing. Maybe there's, a handful of special interests that fight it pretty hard, but, as far as the mass of the population, like, we all need to get on the same page and get to that, that end point, wherever that is, as soon as possible. Because, one thing that comes to mind this past legislative session, one of the big things up in Tallahassee that was discussed was nutrients flowing into Lake Okeechobee. There's this whole bill. The Blue-Green Algae Task Force worked on it, and one of the things that Dr. Parsons and others on there were bringing up during the meeting is like, well, 75 to 80% of the nutrients that flow into Lake Okeechobee come from agriculture, one way or another. It doesn't mean they're bad. It's just what it is. That's the dominant land usage north of the lake, and that's where those nutrients are coming from. And it's as soon as that becomes the discussion, then a lot of the people in politics, it suddenly becomes well, you hate agriculture. It's like, no, we all eat food. I eat a lot of it. I eat about 10 meals a day.
Right.
And it's like that. That's a solution that we need to come up with. It doesn't mean we hate anybody or anybody hates clean water. It's just like, that's a problem. And if we're burying that and refusing to talk about it, then it's never going to get fixed. Right. Are there things they could do to cut back on their nutrients? Yeah, I'm sure. What are we going to have to do to help them do that? I don't know. I mean, I'm far from a scientist, but I'm smart enough to know that if we keep pretending like, oh, well, let's just fix all these other things and ignore, dominant pollution sources, then they're still going to be there. So.
Right. And my whole big problem with that is that, a lot of these strategies, especially in Lake O, is we're proposing band-aids. You know, what are we going to do about the algae blooms in Lake O, instead of going back and actually fixing, you know, what isn't broken, in a sense. So going back to agriculture and putting BMPs that actually work and monitoring those BMPs, going back into our urban and suburban environments and promoting low impact development retrofit, treating nutrients at the source, you know, doing what we can at our own homes, but also having funds to kind of redirect our stormwater instead of going into a storm drain into the ground, so we can really recharge that water table, and also encourage that biological, physical, and chemical degradation of pollutants and nutrients. And it's the same thing for agriculture. You know, all these LID techniques like rain gardens, cisterns, media, filter media that removes nutrients, infiltration trenches, all of this can be applied in agriculture just as much as it can be in urban and suburban environments. So there's a lot of room for improvements here, and it's not that expensive either. In fact, it can save money on infrastructure.
Well, yeah, and if you look at the the impact of water quality down the road, you know, the cost of preventing those things, ultimately you come out money ahead if you prevent, you know, collapses like we saw in 2018 from happening. So
right,
you're right, and just, you know, looking at things like buffer zones that have aquatic plants. You know, we hosted a film at our office at Collaboratory not too long ago about some scientists that were working over. They were working at kind of a bunch of different places, but where was it, Dana, that they were working on like the plant filter marsh? Was it India?
Yeah, so they did that in India and Israel.
In Israel, yeah, and they were, you know, they were looking at. They had these rivers that were polluted from runoff, and the river was also the water source for those people.
right.
And ultimately, they found out the way to clean that water was basically these miniature, like what we would call an STA, these miniature filter marshes with different aquatic and subaquatic plants to remove what nutrients there were, that were built right into the landscape of the cities. They were incorporated along the banks of the river, between the cities, you know, to take that runoff off of roads, run it through those things before it made its way into the river. They built parks around them. It was really a cool story that had a lot of kind of similarities and connections to concepts that we can implement here.
Yeah, and it's interesting because what we do here, so we use vegetative wetlands to treat water, but really what's happening is that we're developing over wetlands, and we're doing something called wetland mitigation, where we move those wetlands and create a wetland and then say it's better than what was naturally there in the first place. But the goal, at least my experience in engineering, civil engineering in the state of Florida, is that we were always focused on water quantity. We wanted to make sure that people weren't being flooded, that roads weren't being flooded, that it wasn't a dangerous situation, which is important. I mean, we see places in especially in the Middle East that doesn't get much rain, and then when they do, you know, that rain just piles up between the buildings, and there's massive loss of lives. But here we need to be focused on quality too, and we can't just keep on making these assumptions. Oh, well, if that water stays in that pond for 24 hours, then we're good. It doesn't look like that, and it's subjective on what kind of geology, soils, plants that you have in your, and where the water is coming from, what kind of land uses, and what kind of people are there, honestly. What are they doing to their own lawns? All of that plays a role in how water needs to be treated. And you know, back in the day, boy, not that long ago, I guess 2010-ish, they were going to do that statewide stormwater rule.
Mm-hmm.
And even though there were problems with it, the thought that they were breaking it up into at least different segments to administer their own water quality standards and adding more monitoring. I mean, it was a step in the right direction.
Yeah. You know, and
I think, you know, if you were to look back like, you know, 100 years ago, and, you know, who knows, none of us were here then, but if you were to ask people that were coming down to Florida, you know, to hang out, to buy property, whatever, you know, what's your biggest concern? And, you know, being flooded out was probably, you know, flooding and mosquitoes were probably at the top of the list. Water quality, absolutely not. I mean, I don't think anybody 100 years ago even ever thought about water quality or you know, thought that could change. But if you look now, you know, tourism, $70 billion a year industry in Florida, by far our number one industry. If you were to run a poll of like, you know, everybody of the tens of millions of people that come down here every year, what are you more concerned about? Getting flooded out when you visit Florida or experiencing toxic algae blooms? I think we know exactly, you know, where people's concerns are. And that's,
well
you
said.
know, we're in the 21st century economy now, and we need to start treating it like that. Because, you know, we have the infrastructure to make sure people are not going to, you know, flood and die now, but we don't have the infrastructure to clean up the huge messes. I mean, 5 times the amount of nutrients in our Lake Okeechobee than what scientists say it can handle right now. We're 5 times over there. You know, if we were flooding out 5 times as many, you know, homes, like people would be, you know, flipping out over that. But the fact is we're not. Like it's, you know, flooding is a very small, very low risk thing that happens now. You know, we've got Herbert Hoover Dike. We've got all these flood control systems that, you know, have been put in across the state since then. And for the most part, they're working very well. I mean, you know, we had water in our home in Irma, but it was a very small amount. And, you know, it was by no means life threatening. It was a couple inches of water. A couple other of our neighbors had the same deal. But for the most part, I don't know anybody, you know, in Florida that was like, you know, got their home washed away from it. But I don't know anybody that wasn't affected by what happened here in 2018. I mean, it hit us all in the pocketbook. Whether you're a property owner, or, you know, business owner, whatever. When there's dead stuff washing up on the beaches, cyanobacteria in the fresh water, you know, all over national news, that's not good for the economy, and it's not good for, you know, our life's quality of life.
And you know what the craziest thing was? That it was such a big deal for all of us. I went and did a talk at the University of Florida, assuming that everybody knew what I was talking about. They didn't even know what red tide was.
Hmm.
And it's, you know, there's a lot of this not in my backyard, a lot of, you know, lack of empathy for the greater society that we need to encourage for these big changes to happen, because the people in Tallahassee, they weren't affected by Lake O or Florida red tide.
Right. Yeah, and you know what? I think that's where a big part where outreach and advocacy comes in is one way or another, it affects people whether they recognize it or not. It may not be a first person effect like a fishing guide, but it could be an effect on, you know, property values. It could be effect on tourism, which, you know, every dollar that gets spent into our economy doesn't just happen. It gets respent over and over. So you could be very far removed from a direct effect of water and still be affected. And
oh, you're right. So look at how we're approaching the pandemic versus climate change. You know what I mean? We have that acute versus indirect or in the future effects. And I think that's kind of, you know, a real, you know, good look or clear look at exactly what you're saying, is that everybody is affected by it, but they don't realize it, or they think, oh, I'll just deal with it when it affects me type thing.
Yeah. And that was something, you know, like Chris and I had never been involved with any kind of environmental activism, like nothing. Like we minded our own business, caught fish and cooked food. Like that's
I caught a lot more fish than he did, by the way.
Oh, bullshit. So we had never gotten involved with anything, and we you know, we got involved with this, and, you know, like the climate thing, honestly, like I didn't really think of it, like, because it, like, you have all these different variables that affect you on a day-to-day basis. You're just like, you know, there's nothing I can do about it. You know, I was wrong, but that was the mindset I had. And getting involved with this, even for the first few years, like I didn't really put a whole lot of thought into this climate thing, but we've probably met I don't know, Chris, like hundreds of scientists, several hundred scientists, and not a single one of them has ever been like, well, I'm not real sure if that's real. Like, no, they're all like, it's happening. It's going to affect your life. It already is affecting your life. It's going to continually and increasingly affect your life from here on out. So it's like, although it's not our mission at Captains to focus on it, it's definitely been a good learning experience because, I honestly had just, for whatever reason, like it was not something, learned about it in school, but it wasn't something like I had like personally taken up and embraced. But, just the amount of skepticism around it in society. And we saw that with COVID-19, like the first few weeks, over half of America thought it was a hoax. It was like 60% of Americans thought it was a hoax. And now it's like, a small fraction. And it just shows you, like, I think we talked about this before, like when you're looking at, a problem, when like the closer death or like serious like economic catastrophe is, the more seriously you're going to take it. And until then, people just have a terrible tendency to think all this stuff is fake. So it was, the coronavirus it was interesting to watch it because like a lot of people I know were like posting all kinds of like memes and like it's fake, and now they're like not leaving their homes. A lot of them are high risk. They're like, we're gonna die, and it's like, yeah, well, maybe you shouldn't have been an idiot or a COVID-idiot, as you called them. So
COVID-idiots, yes, that was I've done a lot of things in my life. I think that was the most effective creation or development that I've ever had. Is my hashtag.
I don't know.
Yeah, and it definitely caught on too. There's a lot of people that were perpetuating that one.
It's also Tracy, talking about Band-Aid solutions and people having a disconnect from like the bigger picture. One of the things that Daniel and I talk about a lot is, as fishermen, we look at systems as a whole. We don't just look at, this one particular spot is good because that spot's good. It's good at a certain time and for a certain reason in relationship to that whole system. And so you see the connectivity in the outdoors, and whether, I'm a hunting guide and a fishing guide, and in order to be successful, you have to look at the big picture, and you have to also look at the minute nuances that affect everything. And the combination of those are what make you successful. But people have a tendency when they're disconnected to think it's not in my backyard and it doesn't affect me, or that this is in my backyard. And so they want to look at how to just fix the problem in their backyard. Bleaching algae, for example, it's like, oh, well, how do we, we need these bubble curtain things to get the algae out of my backyard, or this, algae sucker contraption. And it's like, well, the real solution is not to address the symptom of the problem. It's to address the problem itself so that you don't deal with it. And that's part of educating people to look at the big picture and look upstream and realize that rather than constantly putting Band-Aids on, the symptoms of an ailing system, is to address the system in the first place.
You're exactly right. It's like when your kitchen is flooding, what's the first thing you do? You turn off the faucet before you get the towels and start cleaning it up. And yes, what you just said, that is something that I'm super passionate about, is just kind of covering up these symptoms or treating these symptoms while the actual source of the problem continues to escalate. And until we start, increasing our regulations on development and monitoring agriculture, I worry that those problems are going to keep on growing, and we'll just keep on throwing aluminum or copper sulfate on algae blooms, or they do use alum too, and what we're doing is creating a new problem, really.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. Like I remember a couple of these people that were calling us in 2018, and there's algae all over the place. Like, we're heading to your office right now. We got this thing in the back of our truck that's going to fix all this. And I would just tell them, like, look, no, you don't. Like, it's not fixing all this. You might be able to, clean off a half acre of algae with it. But, the issue we have, in South Florida is, the Everglades used to be a river. It's got a dam in it. There's too much pollution coming in from the top side, and the water can't flow south. So it's, you have
Right.
these emergency valves, the Caloosahatchee and St. Lucie, they're dumping all this toxic water. So if you think that, a glorified shot back is going to fix this problem, then
Oh, I know.
you're wrong. Yeah, like you've got to open the bottom up. You've got to stop the pollution from coming in, and then that's like the aorta of the problem. But you've got all these other little veins. I've got one a half mile from my house, the 6 mile slough that runs through Fort Myers. Like all these other smaller tributaries have the same thing on a smaller scale. Like,
And they all contribute.
Yep.
yeah. So it's like you've got to deal with the aorta because the patient's dying. You've also got to work on all these little veins that feed the whole system because it's the same issue. Too much pollution and the water's too flashy because going back to what you're talking about with the wetlands, like we've drained all these wetlands that used to be sponges and put in these little ponds and stuff all over the place that are definitely not natural looking. I mean, a square pond with a fountain in the middle is not what Florida used to look like.
I know.
So.
And that fountain just makes it so those algae blooms can't grow. It doesn't mean that there's not a ton of nutrients in there.
Right. And that's something about, a lot of the reason that we have problems to deal with now is just a result of things that were done. Most of the things are a result of things that were done in the past. And they weren't done maliciously. They were just done thinking, not looking at all the consequences. And so moving forward, not only do we have to address fixing the consequences of our actions in the past, but we have to make sure that we're not creating or mitigating the amount of consequences for the next generation to deal with.
Right.
And it's not that we want to stop development. We're not anti-growth.
Right.
But we have to do it smart, and we have to do it where we're low impact. We're not. I don't care what you say. You can't bulldoze a wetland and say that you're going to mitigate in another location or some place, and you're going to do it, and it's going to actually work better than the natural wetland worked. Like I've had people in public office make that statement publicly to me.
Oh yeah, land developers tried to sell me that a million times.
I'm going, what are you talking about? Like that your man-made thing is going to work better than what you destroyed.
Right.
Like, it's just, it makes no sense. And
right.
No,
the public just isn't aware of those things. And,
Yeah. And I don't know if you guys know this, but after I was in land development, I went back to school to prove that there was a better way to manage land, to approach land development. So my master's was actually on, I was a storm chaser, developing different filter media to remove nutrients. I was really focused on phosphorus from stormwater, but my dissertation was on a watershed scale, low impact development retrofit plan. So I wanted to prove that I can take an urban suburban environment and go back and retrofit and create a design that more mimics the natural hydrology. And that I can do that successfully and restore the subsurface hydrology as well as the surface hydrology. And you can accomplish that. I got up to 90% efficiency in the University of Florida. I mean, it's an urban environment. So if I can do this here, we can do this in the state of Florida everywhere.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And you see
definitely
signs of it,
All right, we got to take a quick break here. Quick break.
All right.
Time for a rebeer. What are we doing? The train wreck or the G13?
It's time for the viewers to choose.
The first comment. Yep.
Let's see here. We got
In case they need it. This is what we had last time. Palm City Citrify. We've got Sweetwater 420 G13 or Sweetwater train wreck.
I'm
There's
going
a little bit of a delay,
but let's see what first comment gets it. We're gonna look to look to the viewers to guide Daniel on his next beer.
G13, boom.
13,
G13
there
it is.
Oh, we
All
lost
right, that
Doc.
was easy.
Oh, it looks like we have a landslide on behalf of G13.
Yeah. Yep, G13 for the win here. And
Oh,
this one was a double. This one was a double, so it's probably.
Can you see
Well,
Tracy?
I don't know. It could have been interesting.
Dan, can you see Tracy?
Oh, Bear Holman train wreck.
Oh,
The first one for train wreck. I'll drink it for you after, bud. As soon as this is actually, I don't know. I'll finish this one quick, and we'll move on to the train wreck. Oh, what happened to Tracy?
I don't know. We lost the doc.
Uh-oh. Rob Morrison already drank this one. This was actually a gift. Somebody dropped this off. Michael Seifert dropped it off at my house after the last one.
Nice.
All right, so we've got somebody behind the scenes. Alicia, she is, I'm sure, working like crazy to get Dr. Tracy back on here. That way, y'all don't have to sit here and deal with Chris and I for another half hour or so. So I'm sure we'll get that straightened out.
Yeah, it's not the first time we've lost a scientist. Won't be the last.
No, and this is like these live streams are getting much smoother. At first, the first one was a total disaster. Second, oh,
Yes,
she's back.
Okay, so I heard you. I could hear you that whole time, but you guys couldn't hear me, and my camera wasn't on. But I'm back.
Well, you're back. Well, it's good to know we didn't lose you. We lost a scientist one time deep in the Everglades, and well, it worked out all right. This was a lot less of an issue.
So it was pretty cool because I saw that one of my incoming interns picked G13, and so did Ricky, who is one of the members of the Planet Posse.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a landslide for G13, except for Bear Holman, and it's not if you know Bear, it's not a surprise that he picked Trainwreck.
That would have been, when I heard Trainwreck, that would have been what I
wrote. That's the one I wanted. I mean, I was really hoping that people were going to pick the Trainwreck, but I mean, you gotta go with what people say on this one. Hashtag Planet Posse. Yep.
Well, let's see. Okay, we had me. I'm scrolling back here. It looks like I remember I saw we had a.
Looks like everybody's agreeing with us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to find somebody to disagree. And come on.
All right, so we have a question here for you, Tracy, and you may or may not. Half the stuff we get asked, we're like, I don't know, but will the Supreme Court ruling on pollution of underground water, referencing your post, help in improving water in Florida, or will it help, or will it be irrelevant?
In reading are you guys familiar with this?
I'm not. Daniel might be.
A little bit,
okay.
Yeah.
So the Supreme Court ruled that groundwater should be included in the Clean Water Act. It counts. Okay. It needs to be protected. Okay, so that's great. It was a huge win for hydrologists, huge win for environmentalists, huge win for public health. However, I do see some gray area in there where people can fight. So it says that the water that is groundwater connected to surface water sources, if it has the same chemical makeup, then it is considered the same water. This is what I'm worried about. I'm worried that depending on the geology, the chemistry, the biology, microbiome, that the groundwater will change ever so slightly and someone can actually fight that. I'm hoping that won't happen and that won't be the case. But I'm really hoping that a lot of these clean water rollbacks that just happened will be reversed. Because a lot of that, the stormwater, that won't be included. Basically, one of the things that got rolled back was the protection of water in dry retention areas. And so in wetlands and things like that. And that stuff it's important. Stormwater is important. I mean, it's our largest non-point solution. So I was pretty infuriated, honestly, with that clean water rollback. Trying not to revisit those feelings, but because there's nothing I can do about it right now, except keep on fighting the fight.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that happened. That our groundwater is now legally part of the Clean Water Act.
Yeah, and I think that's relevant in Florida even more than a lot of places. I mean,
Right.
You see how connected, our base rock majority through Florida being limestone is so porous, and our aquifers are recharged from surface water, so there is a very real connection there.
Yeah, and in the state of Florida, most of us get our drinking water from groundwater.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. Oh, we got a Bentley request, John Lai.
Yep. All right, John, I got you. So for those that don't know, John Lai is the president and CEO, he's both, of the Sanibel Captiva Chamber of Commerce. And
Cool.
I think he and that chamber overall, and really all the chambers down here, deserve a pretty big shout out for getting involved. And we'll definitely have them on at some point on some of these live broadcasts. But when we first started Captains for Clean Water, the Chamber of Commerce groups wanted zero to do with this. They're like, shut up, y'all go away, you're making this worse. And since then, they've, a lot of new leadership from a lot of the groups, but they're like leading the fight for clean water down here. I mean, taking the, John was not the president back then, when we first started, but, that the new direction that he said, and that a lot of the other chambers, they formed an alliance to work on water quality issues. It's been absolutely critical. Like when a couple of pissed off fishing guides show up in Tallahassee, you don't get recognized. But when there's businesses, respected business organizations up there saying our business depends on this, do something, that's what makes a huge difference. So for that, John, you get Bentley. Be right back.
I gotta say, Daniel says a couple of pissed off fishing guides don't get recognized in Tallahassee, but the very first time that Daniel and I went to Tallahassee, we both tried to walk into the Capitol with our skinning knives and pocket knives still on us, and we got recognized. So they definitely recognized us. We got sent back to our vehicle. There's Bentley.
Yeah, hey Bentley, look here, bud. This is Bentley.
Oh,
he's
so cute.
Became a Facebook star after last day. He's tripping out here. He sees his neighbor's dog.
Yeah,
he's monster there's a woodpecker that's like this big on the tree over there. He's looking at that thing.
So
my dog.
We got a comment that the Supreme Court ruling was on a case in Maui where sewage being pumped into ASR wells was leaked into the groundwater.
It's true.
And there you go. So, I mean, that's not surprising. And that also is kind of strikes a chord with us and, one of our just concerns of relying on ASR to deal with, water instead of trying to work on above ground storage and filter marshes and ultimately sending the water where it needs to go.
Right.
These systems, when they're manipulated, whether we're talking about the Everglades system or whether we're talking about a neighborhood, what tends to happen is as the system acted and reacted naturally, when it's manipulated, it moves water through the system faster than it naturally did. You take, whether it's the River of Grass or the Kissimmee River when it was straightened, or whether it's a neighborhood where now there's a lot of impervious surface and water's getting shed into canals or in ditches, and it's just moving water faster. So a lot of the problems are those systems were sped up, and now how do we deal with that water? And we need to look at, again, not the symptom, but the cause, and how can we slow those systems back down? And then how can we mimic the timing and the delivery of water as close as we can to the natural system.
Yep.
And there's ways to do it. ASR is one of those things that just, especially in Florida with a porous substrate like limestone, that it's, you can't help but think, is something we're doing today with ASR with good intentions going to have repercussions down the road that we are going, well, shit, now we just polluted our drinking water.
Right. So that's and slowing down the water, all of that, trying to mimic the natural water cycle. That's all low impact development. That's all like my stuff. But the reason why I chose the watershed that I did is because Lake Alice here in Gainesville was suffering from algae blooms because of fertilizer runoff from our athletic fields. We built a new lacrosse field. It was just getting pounded with nutrients. We had algae blooms. They were adding copper sulfate. And then to handle the overflow, they were then injecting the water from Lake Alice into the subsurface aquifer. And that was problematic to me because a lot of people are like, oh, well, you're doing all this stuff to recharge the aquifer, but we have these clay layers and you're not really getting to that deeper aquifer. I'm like, yeah, you are, but if there's an algae bloom that is treated by copper sulfate and you lyse those cells, you can release that microcystin if it's a microcystis bloom, then insert that toxin into our drinking water source. I'm like, there's so many problems that can potentially happen. And we've seen that in Toledo. It's not like Florida's the only place that suffers from algae blooms. They're worldwide.
Yeah. And it's like, a lot of these, quote unquote solutions, like they might work for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, who knows? But are they going to work for the next 100? And if not, what's the cost to repair them? That's what I always ask. Like, I'm, dealing with issues on my boat here recently. I've been messing around with my boat and yeah, here, John Lai, again, from the Chamber of Commerce. ASRs are this generation's unintended consequence project. I mean, it's definitely a huge risk and a huge concern. I mean, if you take regular wiring, from Home Depot and wire, your bilge pump on your boat and take your boat out and it fills up with water, is it going to work? Absolutely. It'll work. That first time, no problem. Regular copper wire, not the good tinned marine wire that you're supposed to use. It'll 100% work the first time and it'll save you $3 on wire. But the next time you take your boat out, there's a less of a chance. And 2 years down the road, if you're still relying on that, crappy wire from Home Depot for your bilge pump, that costs $3 instead of $8 or $5 or whatever, it's gonna fail on you. I mean, if you don't use anything, it's that time, and we don't know. I mean, we just don't know how long a lot of these solutions are gonna last, and what the cost
analogy.
You're injecting polluted water in and around our drinking water aquifer. You've got, all these chemicals we're putting in. It's like, yeah, it might give you good data for a few years, but it's what is that going to do to the next generation? I mean, how much harder is that going to make them have to work to, sustain life on the planet, yet alone, have awesome outdoor places where we can, recreate and enjoy. I mean, I don't know. I don't think we know the answer to those questions, but
right.
To try to take an easy road out of this when we have a perfectly, valid solutions to, retrofit stormwater, stop nutrient pollution, restore the Everglades. It's like, why are we going to do a dumbass idea because it's politically expedient if there's a good solution that's even simpler, but politically it's a little more challenging.
That was a good speech.
See,
that was good.
That's the G13 kicking in.
That was awesome.
Working.
And Tracy brings up a good point here. She's talking about the sewer systems that is a major problem. But then I also kind of want to bring up the fracking that's happening that no one's talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's an unfortunate thing. We see it a lot. I'm sure you do as a scientist that works in this realm, but we get people coming to us all the times with issues, and there is a lot of issues affecting water quality throughout Florida. Some of them are very local, regional. Some of them are, big, widespread. But all of them need to lead back to taking a common sense approach, not only in dealing with the issue, but making sure that we're not making issues worse going into the future. I mean, you nail it with the talk of like smart development. One of the things that I just, as a person I'm born and raised here, I've seen the changes in, Fort Myers, Southwest Florida, the East Coast. I mean, I've been all over this state my whole life, and to see the way that we are bringing so many more new people into the state, but we're doing it in a very kind of almost like a wasteful, it's just the easiest route. Like, how do
Like
we
haphazard?
Yeah, haphazard. How do we get them here the easiest, the fastest? Where the smart way would be, we look at areas here that were built and developed in the 50s that are run down, that half of the buildings are vacant. And, we need to be incentivizing going in and redeveloping those areas instead of impacting untouched areas.
Yeah,
Like,
we can absolutely grow and not grow our impervious footprint.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And not have this cycle of impacting, the small localized wetlands that help to buffer, with runoff from big storms like Irma, and and help to store water and recharge the ecosystems they're connected with, help to clean water. We need to look at making it a lot more costly as far as impact fees and things like that to just make us have to develop smarter.
Yep.
And we're seeing it in some cases, but we're not seeing it widespread enough. That, look, we can take areas that are already heavily impacted, that and on one end redevelop those areas so we're not impacting new areas, but on the other end also rejuvenate those communities that could use an influx of money and jobs and people in that area. And there's a lot of looking at that.
Absolutely. And I mean, look, I'm just looking here, like in my neighborhood, I'll let's do a little tour here. So we've got like our home. This was like this was built in the 70s, this neighborhood. And like, we're all, pines and oaks. And then, I got my mangoes in here now, but this area was built because it was the most developable area around. Like, we had, pine woods up here, uplands, palmettos. We got a bunch of palmettos. We're all, mostly native landscaping. I got some fruit trees that aren't native, but we don't fertilize or any of that crap around here. But the reason they picked this to develop was because it was the highest land around. And then they came in, and if you look at the Google Earth, go all the way around our neighborhood, there's subdivisions that were built in swamps that, every time it rains now, they're high and dry. And our neighborhood was, it's underwater. Like, we live in a swamp. It's just, it is what it is. But, looking at that, like, they did a lot of damage to the existing, and, that we've got 20 houses on our street, and it's, 100 acres or so. So it did a ton of damage by developing all those wetlands around here. The solutions are a lot more expensive now than if they would have, number one, developed this area right, and also develop those other areas right, to where they're not just putting all their water, onto us. But, it's the bottom line dollar figure comes in with all that. So, when the developers look at it, it's like, oh, here's how we can do this the absolute cheapest. Meanwhile, all that, fertilizer grass that they have in there runs off. So
I mean,
all right,
that's the thing, like, creating regulations that promote long-term economic gain. I mean, that's with climate change too. and hydrology is connected to climate change. But I know in talking to developers, you're exactly right. They built there because it was easier. So for a developer to come into a place that a place that's run down, vacant, they have to not only demolish the building, but then also remove all the piping. And for them, they know exactly how long it's going to take, how much it's going to cost for them to bulldoze a bunch of trees.
Yep.
Like, that's just what they're comfortable with. That's what they want. I even told them, listen, like, you can do things cheaper. You don't need any infrastructure. They just knew how long it was going to take and how much it was going to be. Like, that's where unfortunately, regulations have to come in to kind of guide that development process for our long-term economic gain.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the important part at the end of what you said there. It's for our long-term, economic gain. It's not like we're doing this because, we're tree huggers or anything. It's like, if you don't preserve this, then we're going to lose it all. Like there's
Right.
not really anything in between. It's like, as soon as our water resources are not up to par, then what's the point of having a waterfront home? Who wants a waterfront home if the only thing that you have is, a backyard full of algae or, brown muddy water? No, I mean, the reason people came down here, the reason they bought these places is because, they enjoy those resources. So if they're going to allow, if collectively we're going to allow somebody to come in and, rape and pillage our whole community here for profit, and, you're not taking care of, the resources, then it's going to hurt each and every one of us that's invested, personally. That's the bottom line of it.
And even more so than the recreation, I mean, the public health effects of these algae blooms can be serious. I mean, we don't know how serious they can be long term, but we know that they have a direct effect on our health. We know because we're coughing, we're sneezing, those kind of respiratory illnesses from or conditions, irritation, whatever you want to call it, from these algae blooms. I mean, it's just, it was so heartbreaking the first time the first red tide season that I was at Moat. I started getting these phone calls from people with kids who have asthma, or this man, that this was my first call. This man, his wife has lung cancer, and they had been saving up to spend the winter in Florida for like 10 years. And they asked me if it was going to be safe. How do I answer that question? I have no idea. But it's heartbreaking to know that, like, our impacts, even though red tide blooms, they would be here whether we were here or not. When they get close to shore, surface water nutrients absolutely can play a role. I mean, it just makes sense.
Yeah.
Even if it's so difficult to do the research, because we do have so many different nutrient sources, but we saw it, like, it's just, we really need to reestablish what we're doing here.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, looking at you, we got on the topic of, how we develop smart, looking at some of the benefits of redevelopment. Also, when you keep expanding outside the footprint and tying into a system that, that can only handle the capacity it was originally built for, you're obviously going to start to see problems like what we've seen over in Fort Lauderdale and Miami, but there's an opportunity when we redevelop in areas that are already developed to go in and also fix those and upgrade those infrastructure components along with it, instead of just tying into existing infrastructure. So I think if we're going to develop here and be in a good place, 50 years down the road, we really need to look at it with a very long-term timeline of how we're doing things now, and how that's going to be scalable, and not just look at it as, well, we can build this community, sell these houses now, and not worry about what happens as a consequence.
Right.
Yeah, there's a comment, you mentioned fracking. There's a comment that, and I just saw this article. I haven't had an opportunity to look into it a whole lot, but about the ACOE, Army Corps of Engineers, recently kind of changing their position on oil exploration being of impact in Big Cypress. That's something that, I mean, to me, like as an outdoorsman, one of my favorite things to do, you know, I'm a hunting guy, but one of my favorite things to do is to just be out in those environments. And growing up, my best friends and I, Big Cypress was where we went. It was, you know, Big Cypress, the Turner River unit, you know, Bear Island. It's kind of like that area to me. I think of wild natural Florida. So to think about oil exploration and that, it like, that gives me like goosebumps. Like that is the last thing that should be going on there.
Me too.
Yeah.
I was writing a blog back in 2014 when that law changed, when fracking was suddenly allowed in Florida. I think it was 2014 and 15. It was, I remember because I was writing a blog and I was so upset. I was so upset. But then I didn't hear about anything happening in the state of Florida. I didn't hear about it. And then all of a sudden, you know, that guy from Texas who was acid fracking, you know, down by Big Cypress, he got kicked out. But then I heard that it's happening again. And, you know, like I'm really passionate about fracking because I've seen that low income areas that are affected health wise, and they're the ones with the lowest voices, and it just kills me to think about, you know, the people that I've talked to in West Virginia and Ohio that they turn on their faucet and it smells like gas. They're afraid to use the stove in their own homes, but they were paid to be okay with this because the frackers paid for their land. It's like literally that Matt Damon movie. I don't even know what it's called.
Yeah.
But and then to see the USGS special on Discovery Channel, or maybe it was Nat Geo, where they really looked at the earthquakes and the earthquake connection to hydraulic fracturing processes, and made such a direct correlation. I mean, you really cannot deny, even though, you know, as far as water quality goes, they can't. There has been instances where they have seen no change in water quality, but I know that there has been instances where they have, and taking that chance is not something that I would want to do in a place where we have harsh geology, we depend on groundwater for our drinking water, and we already have sea level or saltwater encroachment and sea level rise.
Yeah.
I mean, we have enough problems to deal with fracking when we have a high water table. It's just the craziest thing.
Yeah, it's
like,
not worth the risk. I mean, so maybe it doesn't have an impact, but if it does, what's the recourse? If it does, I mean, it's not something you can just turn back and reverse those effects.
Right.
Yeah, and it's like for what? Because it's like, how much cheaper does it make gasoline? I mean, like, how much longer are we going to need gasoline? I mean, Dr. Tracy, I know you're rolling out in a badass Tesla now. But I mean, like, really, like, we've got the technology to do that. Sure, like, we're not 100% solar, but we can burn smarter fuels and use a lot less fuel. You know, if we're talking about going to Mars now, we should be able to figure out, you know, how to, you know, not need to frack Florida.
You're so right.
I mean, it just,
oil exploration in the Everglades is not going to, you know, lower the cost of fuel to the American public by probably any measurable amount that we would feel.
Right.
All it's going to do is line the pockets of a very few.
Right.
And that's not worth the risk.
No, it's not. And then I'm sitting here thinking about the oil exploration in the Gulf of Mexico, and that was great that we all voted that down. But now, it's being used for military testing. So it's like it's like we close one door and another one opens. But we really have to take a holistic approach to everything: water, energy. Like, it has to be, and we have to get people involved. Like, the more people that are educated, that understand their impacts and that are willing to change their behaviors, the better we will be long term in every single aspect.
Yeah,
for sure. And it's like, I mean, the oil exploration thing, like, that's something that we're not super involved with it, but I mean, I'm super proud. Like, our congressman Francis Rooney from this area, he's been a champion on it. He's I think kind of paid attention. He's actually been involved in the oil industry in the past, but he recognized that, and he's retiring now, but he recognized that, that's a really important issue to Florida voters. And we've seen a sea change in the last 10 years. Like, after BP,
Awesome.
oil spill, after Deepwater Horizon, no Floridian wants oil exploration out there. I remember, like, when I was in high school, friends and friends' parents, all, they're like, "Oh yeah, we need oil rigs out here because look how good the fishing is in Louisiana." I'm like, yeah. And then, BP oil spill comes around. It's like, no, we absolutely do not need that. One oil spill of that magnitude on Florida beaches, and our tourism industry is done. Nice.
Oh, look, we got a pup.
Hell yeah.
We got another pup. What's this pup name?
You're right about that. One oil spill, and what? Oh, this is Bambolina. She goes by Bam or Bambo.
Bam. What's up, Bam?
She's got a lot of love to give.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Bam.
She's a sweetheart. She has quite a bark when someone comes to the door, but just like today, someone came to the door and then I opened the door and she hid behind me. So useless when it comes down to it. Which I'm proud of that. She's a pit bull that really breaks those stereotypes. So
yep.
I love it.
Oh, I thought she was a poodle.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Look at this. We got Bam in the comments here. 2 people voting for Bambo here.
Yes.
Impressive.
Hi, Bill and Ricky. Yes, Bambo's awesome. I noticed that someone in the comments said something about why not use wastewater for fuel. And, like, that's solid waste to energy plants are something that's being looked at very much in the state of Florida. I know over in the Solid Waste Authority, they're doing a lot with that. So basically they have they take the wastewater, they take out all the water from the wastewater, go through that. And then with the sludge, they make something called biosolids. So biosolids can then be used for fertilizers. And for me, I'm very much pro that, because then, first of all, this phosphate mining has environmental impacts. Obviously, mining is never a good thing. But second of all, the amount of phosphorus that we have, it's not a renewable source, and we're going through it, man.
Right.
Like, we're going through it. So waste to energy, I've always been very, very pro, especially the biosolids. But the problem is that now a concern is PFAS and PFOA. Those kind of endocrine disruptors that are in everything now. I don't know if you've seen Dirty Waters, but the concern is that these biosolids can have some of the endocrine disruptors that we're putting on these agriculture fields. And so that's something that's going to be looked at with a microscope coming up. And I'm interested to see what happens. I really hope that we can find a way to still use these really high quality biosolids. And I hope we can, get to a point where we're getting rid of those endocrine disruptors before they enter our environment.
Yeah. And can you clarify that to, like, I'm asking for a friend. What's an endocrine disruptor? So,
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
A friend with the
Was
same name as his.
okay. So, so endocrine disruptors are a suite of compounds. There's a ton of them that can impact your endocrine system. So it changes your hormones. So you find them all over the place. They're called parabens sometimes. So there's a suite called parabens that are in over-the-counter facial lotions and stuff like that that sustain the shelf life, but that can mimic estrogen in your body. There
gotcha.
are, you know, the movie Dirty Waters, it was Teflon, which was used for military. And then they're like, look, we can use Teflon for everything. Well, what they didn't know is how harmful it was to the human body. So those kind of compounds, the kind of compounds that make fish have two heads, you know, that kind of thing.
Gotcha. Yep. And, you know, talking about like different energy sources, and we're going to do one of these happy hours about aquatic and subaquatic plants and our current, you know, chemical or spraying applications to manage them. But, you know, one of the things that we've talked about there is, you know, is there a byproduct of, you know, harvesting those plants and using them in the very similar way that you're talking about biocides, using them for compost for fertilizer,
Yes.
because of the nutrients that are sequestered in those plants, and also, you know, is there a use for energy? Can they be turned into creating energy? So I think those are the type of conversations we need to have
Right.
to look at, you know, moving forward and being able to grow and sustain and lessen those impacts. Because I mean, you said it, phosphate mining, for example, that's a very invasive practice that we've seen it with the sinkholes and who knows where, you know, that water ends up. But just the irreversible action to the landscape and the runoff. You know, you're mining phosphorus that in the wastewater can make its way into our local watershed. You know, we're not very far from the Peace River here, and all those things are contributors, and from things that are very noticeable, like, you know, making red tide blooms last longer or grow more severe. But also there's a lot of things that, you know, a scientist might recognize under a microscope that isn't real evident to the person, but there's things that are happening at a microscopic level because of these different inputs. And so we need to really look at smart ways to sustain things that we need, like
Right.
agriculture and like development, and do it in a way that is responsible, and that's not, you know, that we can lessen the impact on the natural environment because we all rely on it.
Yeah, that's 100% right, Chris. And I keep getting flashbacks as soon as Dr. Tracy started talking about the mining thing. Do you remember when I think it was the Lee County Commission took up it was just a limestone mine out here. There were people come into the county commission meetings swearing that digging a 100-foot rock mine that's going to take like 20 years to actually like claim all the limestone out of it. They were saying that this is actually going to help the environment because they took it was like a potato farm or some crap. They took that out of production and dug 100 foot, which like my well, I have a above ground well pump here. I'm pulling water from 50 feet. So they're digging deeper than I'm getting my drinking water from, and we filter all of our drinking water through an RO. But it's like they're saying that's going to be a benefit to the environment by
because
digging through the first aquifer. Because they're not going to have to water the potato plants anymore. It's like, come on, you either are an idiot, you're paid off, or you didn't pay any attention in elementary science class.
See, that's the thing, you know, like I see this happening in so many different areas, even with golf courses, you know, like where you're just looking at one thing, replacing a potato thing. Oh, well, we're not going to have any fertilizer runoff anymore. No, but you're going to create a whole slew of new problems. Like it's funny how things are justified, but the real, I mean, everything needs to be looked at holistically. I mean, and that's the perfect example for that.
Yeah. It needs to be looked at through a much wider lens.
Yep.
Like,
there's no one indicator.
It's right. You can't, if you're just looking through this one little, spot, you're not getting all the information. You're not getting all the impact.
Right.
And all the repercussions. So everything needs to be looked at a much wider lens. And then to go hand in hand with that wider lens, we need to have every agency that has a role or in our natural resources or impact, whether it's a county commission, looking at how they do development orders or amend comp plans, to DEP, to FWC, to the water management districts. All of those different entities need to be analyzing how something that they're doing or considering doing is going to have an effect on what one of the other agencies' responsibilities are.
Right.
And so that we're not one agency or one group's doing this, but it's having this negative effect on the work that another agency is trying to do. If we're introducing nutrients on one end, and the other end there's this agency trying to remove nutrients, or here's an agency trying to deal with stormwater runoff and flooding, and meanwhile this other one's approving things that are going to increase flooding risk. It's just, there needs to be a lot broader lens looking at the whole system and the impacts of the decisions we make. And then also there needs to be a lot more connectivity and communication between the agencies that are making those decisions on across the board.
And that was a big effort with that statewide stormwater rule. That was going to be a big effort. And the thought is that we have these state rules, and that's supposed to keep that all in mind. And then the counties and the cities can get even more strict than what the state is. And that's why at the state level it's so important, because it really dictates, it sets the bar.
Yeah.
Everything else.
Yeah, definitely so. All right, comment of the day. I like frogs. Kevin Cooley.
Yes.
I'm liking.
I like frogs too. I love frogs.
Yeah, I mean, I'm liking it
now.
I'm doing it on my iPad.
If y'all like frogs, you should come to my house. I got a little pond. It's like, size of a normal swimming pool. And that sucker is chock full of tadpoles right now. I'm about to have a frog outcropping of like mega proportions.
Oh, I love that.
Yep.
I like the.
That's crazy. You got tadpoles with a trout.
Yeah, man. It's like, you wouldn't believe the amount of them. It's amazing.
Yeah, we live in a cypress swamp, so when wet season comes around, I'll give you a contest on the. I bet you we're pulling 120 decibels of frogs here every night. They're loud. I love it though. That's why we live out here. You can't hear the roads, you can't hear anything else. You hear the frogs.
All right, we are 7:23 already.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, we love it. This here's the thing. This is kind of like, normally we try to keep videos to 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, just to keep people engaged the whole time. But the way we look at this is like the equivalent of us going and speaking to a group, a Rotary Club, a class, a school, something like that. And when we do that, we go and speak for an hour, and then we take an hour of questions, and
sometimes so 2 hours if they're unfortunate.
Yeah, so that's kind of the concept here. Is this is we love for these to run long, and look, we're just having conversation. There's no agenda of what we're want to talk about. It's just like we get on here, we get to talk to a scientist as everyday fishermen, everyday people We get to have people chime in and ask questions. I think it's a really cool format. And I mean, an hour and a half flies by like never before. But before we get off of here, before we shut this thing down, I've got a show and tell item that I was gonna bring up on the last one, but I'm gonna show it on this one. And Dr. Tracy, I'm gonna
If
give
I
you
guess
three.
it before you show it, what do I win?
You don't get to guess it. But Tracy,
I have no idea.
if you can guess what this is,
Okay.
then we're gonna get you a fresh Captains for Clean Water hat.
And maybe one of these too.
Yep, and maybe even a Yeti cup.
Yeti.
If one of our viewers guesses it correctly, then we will do the same for them. We'll get them a fresh
that's awesome.
So I'm going to show it to you, and we're going to give it until 7:30, which means 5 minutes for us to get a correct answer before I have to reveal what it is. So I'm going to bring it up to the camera here. Okay, there, this way. I'm going to rotate it.
Microwaved hog's brain.
Huh.
Show its properties.
This is tough. It's like I know that I've seen that before, something like that.
You've seen it.
I know.
Show its properties, Chris. Show its properties.
All right, I'm gonna give you a clue. Do we have any guesses yet?
No.
No guesses? I'm gonna give you a clue. This is a magnet.
Oh, wow. Okay. I mean, it's red.
I don't know how close this will focus, but
it looks like there's some rust there, right?
could be.
Here, we got to give a hint. It was not found in Florida.
It was not found in Florida.
Oh, okay.
But it could be found anywhere.
It's very heavy.
It could be found anywhere.
Could be found anywhere. Okay.
Could be found anywhere.
Literally, there's like it could be found anywhere on the entire planet.
What was the depth that it was found at?
Surface.
Surface. Was it near any fault lines or any kind of igneous rock coming to the surface type thing?
No.
Okay.
Oh, we got a winner in the comments.
No way. Where is this?
Yep.
I'm not even seeing it.
Al Kalbach. Got it.
Al got it? Yes, I knew he would. Okay, so
I don't even see where this comment is.
It's not
I'm
showing
not
up on
seeing
our
the comment
screen.
either.
Here's the hint. ET phone home.
Yep.
Oh,
here we go. We got guesses coming in.
they're all coming in now. A really big potato.
Yes, it's a potato.
Oh gosh, that was really stupid.
There it is. It's a meteorite.
Right.
Yep.
Right. That would make more sense that it came from another
I found this
planet than it did.
This literally came from outer space, which is extremely cool to me because when I start to think about, and my staff knows this, I've talked about this before, but when I start to think about outer space, it completely, like, I can't handle it. It freaks me out. It's like, how can something be never ending? Like, it boggles my mind, and it's not something that happens very often. So this came from outer space. I found it in Wyoming, in north central Wyoming, on a buffalo ranch that I used to go. My buddy had and still has, and I would go out there and work his buffalo ranch when he would come back home to Florida and whatnot. And I found this when I was building fences. I looked down; it was in a very shallow crater and had been there a long time. But I just, for whatever reason, I looked at it. It just was weird. I picked it up, noticed how heavy it was, and threw it in the tractor. And it was probably in that tractor for a month or so before I even thought about it again. And one day I saw it, kind of started checking it out. And you can, up close, you can see how, like, It's definitely got some iron in it, and you can literally see how parts of it are melted from coming from the Earth's atmosphere.
Oh my God.
And we were actually up, John Live from the chamber. We were up in Washington, D.C., and we were in the Smithsonian, and we saw a whole bunch of.
We had convinced ourselves that this thing was worth like $20 million. Do you remember that?
Yeah, so we saw these meteorites.
We found some really rare ones.
That's so
exactly
funny.
like this. And we're going, if these things are in the Smithsonian, I'm sitting on $1 million here, and we come find out.
I'm like, all right, I'm gonna kill him on the flight home. Like, I'm gonna suffocate him, and then go back there and steal it. And we find out it's worth like $40. Like, not worth it.
Yeah, they're pretty common, but nevertheless, I found it in Wyoming, and it sits on my desk here.
And now it's priceless.
Pretty cool thing. So, so Al, priceless. You got yourself a Captains for Clean Water hat. Send us a
send us a message.
Message or instant message or whatever the.
I'm so glad. Al is actually my team member, like at the top for Inspector Planet. He helps with the Facebook page, and like nice. I'm really happy that he was the winner.
Nice. All right. So before we sign off for the night, Tracy, you've done a lot of cool shit in your day.
But this is by far the coolest thing you've ever done.
Top two,
obviously,
being on Mythbusters or Happy Hour with the Captains. What takes the cake?
Oh, Happy Hour with the Captains.
Yeah.
Boom. Cooler than
painting a room with C4 was a close second. That was really fun. And as an environmentalist, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do any explosions. But it was so much fun. I have to, for a once in a lifetime type thing, to teach people about science and to get them involved when they don't realize it. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, I think, that's one of those things. It goes back to you kind of thinking outside the box on how you expose people or teach people about science. That show did exactly that. It was entertaining while educational. So if we could all think we'd get a lot further. If they had more programs like that when I was in school, I probably would have paid attention a lot more.
Right, and it's unfortunate that it's now canceled. But I'm really hoping that the next things that I do will do exactly that. I'm on a show called What on Earth, and I think it does a really great job of reaching people. The only problem is that What on Earth is on Science Channel. So if someone's watching Science Channel, they're already into science. But there's a new show called Weird Earth that's going to be on Weather Channel that I'm hoping will do something like that. And then I have a couple things in production or in development that might do the same thing. And one of them's really fun. It's kind of like Mythbustery, but it's more practical. It's like actually application, and I'm bringing environment in, even though they don't realize it yet.
Awesome.
Nice.
You have to trick them at every level.
Then there's our rap video, which is going to be groundbreaking.
Yeah, that should be on MTV. Before we leave, number 1, Trainwreck. Bear Holman, you're the sole winner on this one. This is by far the best beer I've had on this episode.
We're gonna all have to try Trainwreck.
2, Citrify. 3, the G13. They're all delicious. I liked them, but the Trainwreck was the winner here. Woo, there it is. So that's my recommendation. Get the Trainwreck. Right. You're in Fort Myers. Get some of this Citrify.
Awesome. All right, Tracy, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. That was fun.
So we're gonna be like unlive. Alicia is behind the scenes right now. She's gonna make us unlive, then we'll be here still. So just stay on, but she'll make us disappear.
Yeah, stay on.
See y'all.
Everybody, thanks.
Let everybody know where can they follow you to get some of your cool outside the box science.
Inspector Planet, at Inspector Planet. Please follow me, especially on Instagram, because I need more followers so I can give people more information. Apparently, you need 10,000 to start uploading links. And I'm almost there, but I'm not there.
All
There
right,
you
yeah,
go.
everybody go on Instagrams right now. Go on the Instagram. Hashtag, no, not hashtag, at Inspector Planet. Go on there, do it. Do your part. You'll learn everything from retrofitting stormwater treatment systems to which kind of face masks are effective. Plastic bags,
Oh yeah.
by far the most effective. So go on their Instagram at Inspector Planet. Give Dr. Tracy a follow, and thanks for joining us today. And with that,
Yeah,
we're out.
thanks a lot. Thanks for
Thanks,
tuning in.
everybody.
I appreciate it.
Oh, and Michelle.